Rosa Williams had been mopping the marble floors of St. Carlen's private hospital for 12 years, invisible to everyone who passed her by, while her 17-year-old daughter Amira sat in the waiting room reading discarded medical journals, absorbing knowledge that most people needed decades to understand. And when Lorenzo Vitale, the city's most feared mafia boss, watched his son die despite 100 specialists failing to save him, he never imagined that a cleaning lady's daughter with no degree and no credentials would notice what every expert had missed, a deadly pattern hidden in plain sight. And tonight Amira was about to prove that genius doesn't need permission. It only needs someone brave enough to speak when the whole world expects silence. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The fluorescent lights of St. Carlen's private hospital hummed their endless drone, casting everything in a pale, sterile glow. Rosa Williams pushed her mop bucket down the marble corridor, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. She'd been cleaning these halls for 12 years now, long enough to recognize the different sounds of urgency. Tonight, the urgency was different. Sharp, desperate. Another specialist flew in from Geneva. A nurse whispered to her colleague near the supply closet. "That makes what, 98? 99? 103. Actually," the other replied. "None of them can figure it out. The boys' organs are just shutting down one by one. No infection, no disease they can name." Rosa kept her head down, wringing out her mop. She'd learned long ago that being invisible was a survival skill. People said things around cleaning staff they'd never say to each other in meetings. She'd heard about Lorenzo Vitale's son 3 weeks ago when the ambulances first arrived with their police escort. A 14-year-old boy, carried in on a stretcher, already unconscious. "I heard Lorenzo threw a chair at Dr. Patterson yesterday," the first nurse continued. "Told him if one more doctor came in here talking about possibilities and probabilities, he'd make sure they never talked again." Rosa shivered. She knew the name Lorenzo Vitale the way everyone in the city knew it. You didn't speak it loudly. You didn't ask questions. The man controlled half the shipping industry through legitimate businesses and the other half through means nobody wanted to examine too closely. The nurses moved away, their soft-soled shoes padding down toward the intensive care wing. Rosa continued her work, moving methodically from room to room. She had 4 more floors to clean before midnight, and then she'd take the bus home to her small apartment where her daughter waited. Amira, just thinking about her, brought a small smile to Rosa's tired face. 17 years old and smarter than anyone Rosa had ever met. Smarter than the doctors who rushed past without seeing her. Smarter than the professors at the university she couldn't afford to attend. Rosa finished the hallway and pushed her cart toward the family waiting area on the 3rd floor. That's where Amira would be, tucked into the corner with whatever book she'd brought today. Rosa had asked her 100 times not to wait at the hospital, to go straight home after school, but Amira insisted. "I'll worry about you here alone," she'd say, as if Rosa was the one who needed protecting. When Rosa rounded the corner, she found her daughter exactly where she expected. Amira sat cross-legged in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, her school uniform slightly rumpled. But it wasn't a novel in her hands. It was a thick medical journal, the kind Rosa sometimes found in the break room trash after doctors discarded them. "Baby, you reading that thing again?" Rosa asked, keeping her voice low. Amira looked up, her dark eyes bright with concentration. "Mom, listen to this. It's about neurotoxins and how they can mimic the symptoms of organ failure. The body attacks itself, trying to fight something that isn't technically alive." Rosa said, though she only understood about half of what Amira said these days. "You eat dinner? The sandwich you packed. Mom, did you know there are toxins that can remain completely undetectable in standard blood work? They hide in the fatty tissues and release slowly." Rosa sat down beside her daughter, feeling the ache in her lower back from 8 hours of mopping and scrubbing. "That's real interesting, honey. But maybe you should be reading something for school? You got that college application essay to write." Amira's face fell slightly. They both knew the essay didn't matter much. Even with Amira's perfect grades and her scores that made her guidance counselor's eyes go wide, college required money they didn't have. Scholarships required connections, recommendations from important people, internships at fancy companies. They had none of those things. "I'll write it," Amira said quietly. "I just find this stuff more interesting than writing about my dreams and aspirations." Rosa pulled her daughter close, kissing the top of her head. "Your dreams matter, baby. Don't ever think they don't." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Amira suddenly sat up straight, her attention caught by something down the hall. Rosa followed her gaze to see a team of doctors emerging from the elevator, their faces grave. They moved quickly toward the intensive care wing, where Lorenzo Vitale's son lay dying. "That's the third consult today," Amira whispered. "How do you know that?" "I've been paying attention. Different doctors, different specialties. The first was a toxicologist from Johns Hopkins. Second was a neurologist from Mass General. These look like immunologists based on their badges." Rosa stared at her daughter. "You can see their badges from here?" "The tall one says Anderson. You published a paper last year on autoimmune responses to environmental triggers. I read it in one of the journals." Before Rosa could respond, a commotion erupted from down the hall. Ray's voices, sharp and angry. Rosa instinctively stood, ready to grab Amira and move away from whatever trouble was brewing. But Amira was already standing, her notebook in hand, watching intently. A man emerged from the intensive care wing. Even from a distance, his presence demanded attention. Lorenzo Vitale was not particularly tall or imposing in stature, but something about the way he moved made people step aside. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour. His suit probably cost more than Rosa made in 6 months. But it was his eyes that struck her most. Cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd seen too much and felt too little. "Autoimmune response," he said, his voice low but carrying. "That's what you said 2 weeks ago. And last week it was a rare blood disorder. The week before, environmental poisoning. Do any of you actually know anything? Or are you all just guessing with expensive words?" Dr. Anderson, the immunologist Amira had identified, stepped forward. "Mr. Vitale, I understand your frustration, but medicine isn't always straightforward. Your son's case is extremely complex." "My son is dying," Lorenzo interrupted. His voice never rose, but somehow that made it more terrifying. "And I've flown in 100 of the world's best doctors. 100. Every single one of you has told me something different. Tests, theories, possibilities. I don't want possibilities. I want results. Sir, we're doing everything. Everything would have saved him by now." Lorenzo pulled a watch from his wrist, an expensive piece that glinted under the lights. For a moment, Rosa thought he might check the time. Instead, he threw it against the wall with such force that the crystal face shattered. "Get out, all of you. Send me someone who can actually think." The doctors scattered like birds. Rosa quickly grabbed her mop, pretending to clean a spot on the already spotless floor. She'd learned to become invisible in moments like these. Lorenzo Vitale's gaze swept the hallway, and for one brief second, his eyes passed over her and Amira without seeing them at all. Then he was gone, disappearing back into his son's room with the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Rosa exhaled slowly. "Come on, baby. Let's go home." But Amira wasn't moving. She was staring at the closed door with an expression Rosa had seen before. It was the same look she got when working on a particularly difficult math problem or when she discovered something interesting in one of her books. "Amira? You okay?" "Mom," Amira said slowly. "What if they're all looking in the wrong place?" "What do you mean?" "All these specialists, they're treating symptoms. They're looking at the organs failing, the blood work coming back abnormal, the brain activity slowing down. But what if the cause isn't medical? What if it's chemical? Something introduced that's not supposed to be there?" Rosa felt a chill run down her spine. "Baby, you can't get involved in this. These aren't our people. This isn't our world. I'm not trying to get involved. I'm just thinking out loud." But Amira's hand was already moving, her pen scratching notes in the margin of her notebook. Rosa knew that look. Once Amira started thinking about something, truly thinking about it, she wouldn't stop until she'd worked it through. It was a gift and a curse, that brilliant mind trapped in circumstances that would never let it fully shine. "Let's go," Rosa said firmly. "Now." Amira nodded and gathered her things, but Rosa saw her daughter's gaze linger on that closed door one more time before they left. The next 3 days passed in a blur of routine. Rosa cleaned the same floors, pushed the same cart, listened to the same worried whispers. Lorenzo Vitale's son, Matteo, was getting worse. His kidneys were failing now. The doctors had him on dialysis, but it was like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Amira kept coming to the hospital after school, kept reading her medical journals, kept taking her careful notes. Rosa wanted to tell her to stop, to focus on her own life, but how could she? This was Amira's life. Learning was as natural to her as breathing. On the 4th evening, Rosa was cleaning the patient rooms on the 3rd floor when she reached room 312. It was supposed to be empty, being prepared for a new arrival. But when she pushed open the door, she saw Amira's notebook lying on the bedside table. "Oh, that girl," Rosa muttered, picking it up. She'd have to bring it home tonight. But as she turned to leave, a nurse entered the room. Sharon Fitzgerald, one of the senior nurses who'd been at St. Carlen's even longer than Rosa. "What's that?" Sharon asked, pointing at the notebook. "Just something my daughter left behind. She waits for me sometimes." "Let me see that." Sharon took the notebook before Rosa could object, flipping it open. Her eyes scanned the pages, her expression shifting from curiosity to confusion to something like anger. "This is patient information. Medications, dosages, vital signs. How did your daughter get access to confidential medical records?" "She didn't, I swear. She just observes things. She likes science, medicine. She doesn't mean any harm. These are detailed notes on the Vitale boy." Sharon's voice had gone cold. "Diagrams, chemical formulas, theories about toxicology. Is your daughter stealing information? Selling it to the press?" "No, Sharon, please. She's just a kid who likes to learn. She reads medical journals for fun. This is just her trying to understand. I'm reporting this to administration." Sharon clutched the notebook tightly. "This is a serious breach of patient privacy. Your daughter shouldn't even know that boy's name, let alone have detailed notes on his condition." Rosa felt her world tilting. "Please don't do this. I'll talk to her. She won't come back to the hospital. Just please don't report this." But Sharon was already leaving, the notebook in her hand like evidence at a crime scene. Rosa stood in the empty room, her heart pounding. 12 years of perfect service, of showing up even when she was sick, of never complaining, of being invisible. And now, because of a notebook, because of Amira's brilliant, curious mind, it might all come crashing down. She needed to find Amira, needed to get her out of the hospital before this got worse. But when Rosa rushed to the 3rd floor waiting area, her daughter wasn't there. Panic rising, Rosa hurried through the corridors, checking each floor. She finally found Amira on the 5th floor, standing outside the intensive care wing, staring through the observation window at the bank of monitors inside. Rosa grabbed her arm. "We need to go. Right now. Mom, look at those monitors. The one for room 504. That's Matteo Vitale. Every time they administer the epinephrine compound, his neural activity spikes abnormally. But they're not catching it because they're watching the heart rate, not the brain waves." "Amira, stop." Sharon found your notebook. "She thinks you stole patient information." Amira's eyes went wide. "I didn't steal anything. I just observed." "I know that, baby, but it doesn't matter. We need to leave before this gets worse." But it was already too late. Voices rose from around the corner. Sharon's voice, sharp and accusatory, and another voice Rosa recognized. Dr. Nathan Hale, one of the young interns who'd started at St. Carlen's 6 months ago. Rosa had cleaned his office a few times. He seemed kinder than most of the doctors, always saying thank you, always remembering her name. "I'm telling you, these aren't the ramblings of someone mocking medicine," Nathan was saying. "These are legitimate observations. The molecular diagrams are accurate. The theory about synthetic neurotoxins is actually plausible." "She's the 17-year-old daughter of a cleaning lady," Sharon shot back. "How would she even know what molecular diagrams are?" "I don't know, but look at this notation here. She's identified a potential interaction between the epinephrine and an unknown compound that could be causing the neural inflammation. That's exactly what the Hopkins team missed last week." They rounded the corner and stopped short when they saw Rosa and Amira. Sharon's face was flushed with anger. Nathan looked curious, holding the notebook open. "You," Sharon said, pointing at Amira. "You need to explain how you got this information right now, or I'm calling security." Amira lifted her chin, and Rosa recognized the stubborn set of her daughter's jaw. "I didn't get information from anywhere. I watched. I observed. The monitors are visible from the waiting area. The doctors discuss cases in the hallways. I read the medical journals they throw away. Everything in that notebook came from publicly visible sources and my own analysis." "Your own analysis," Sharon repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "You expect me to believe a teenager with no medical training?" Amira Williams. A voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "That's your name?" Everyone turned. Lorenzo Vitale stood at the end of the hallway, his presence sucking the air from the space. Rosa felt her legs go weak. Behind him stood two men in dark suits, clearly security, clearly armed. "Mr. Vitale," Sharon stammered. "I'm sorry for the disturbance. We're handling a potential security breach." I asked the girl a question. Lorenzo's eyes were fixed on Amira, and Rosa wanted to scream, to throw herself between this dangerous man and her daughter. "Is your name Amira Williams?" "Yes, sir," Amira said, her voice steady despite her mother's grip tightening on her arm. "And you wrote that?" He gestured to the notebook in Nathan's hands. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Amira blinked. "Why? Why did you write detailed medical observations about my son? Are you working for someone? One of my competitors? The press?" "No, sir. I just—" Amira paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I just wanted to understand. Medicine fascinates me. When I heard about a case that stumped so many specialists, I couldn't help but try to figure it out myself." "And did you?" "Figure out? I have a theory." The hallway went completely silent. Even the usual hospital sounds seemed to fade away. Lorenzo Vitale took 3 steps forward, and Rosa felt her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Mr. Vitale, please," Rosa heard herself saying. "My daughter didn't mean any disrespect. She's just a curious kid. She didn't mean any harm to your son." Lorenzo's eyes flicked to Rosa for the first time, really seeing her. "You're the cleaning woman. 3rd floor, usually." "Yes, sir." "Rosa Williams. I worked here 12 years. My daughter, she's a good girl. She just likes science. Please don't hurt her." Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. Not quite amusement, not quite pity. "I'm not going to hurt anyone, but I am curious." He turned back to Amira. 100 doctors have examined my son. 100 trained medical professionals with decades of experience and walls full of degrees. And you think you know something they don't? "No, sir," Amira said quietly. Rosa had never been prouder or more terrified of her daughter. "I don't think I know more than them. I think I see what they don't." Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he turned to Nathan. "Dr. Hale, isn't it?" "Yes, sir." "Bring that notebook. You two come with me." He pointed at Rosa and Amira. "The rest of you, go back to work. If I hear one word of this conversation repeated to anyone, I'll know exactly who to blame." Sharon and the other nurses scattered immediately. Nathan hesitated, then followed as Lorenzo turned and walked toward the intensive care wing. Rosa clutched Amira's hand as they followed, terrified of what would happen next. Lorenzo led them to a small private office near the ICU. It was clearly where doctors met with families to deliver bad news. The walls were painted a soothing blue, and there were boxes of tissues on every surface. Lorenzo sat behind the desk, his security taking positions by the door. Rosa and Amira sat in the chairs across from him. Nathan stood to the side, still holding the notebook. "Now, then," Lorenzo said, his voice calm but cold. "Tell me your theory." Amira's hand trembled in Rosa's grip, but when she spoke, her voice was clear. "The symptoms suggest a neurotoxin, but not a natural one. Something synthetic. It's attacking the nervous system in a way that looks like multiple organ failure, but the organs aren't failing on their own. They're being told to fail by corrupted neural signals." "The toxicology screens came back negative," Lorenzo said. "Every single one. Because they're looking for known toxins. Standard screens check for maybe a few hundred compounds. But there are thousands of synthetic compounds that wouldn't show up unless you specifically test for them. Military research, experimental drugs, industrial chemicals. Some of them are so new they don't have established detection methods yet. Lorenzo leaned back in his chair. And you know this how? I read a lot. Medical journals, research papers, case studies. Last year, there was a case in Brazil where a scientist was poisoned with a compound that took 3 months to identify because it was derived from a plant that had never been studied for toxicological properties. Nathan stepped forward. If I may, Mr. Vitale. Looking at her notes, she's identified something the rest of us missed. The medication we've been giving Matteo to stabilize his heart rate might actually be making things worse if there is a neurotoxin present. The compound could be interacting with the unknown substance, amplifying its effects. That's ridiculous, Lorenzo said, but his tone suggested he wanted to be convinced otherwise. There's a way to test it, Amira said. She was gaining confidence now, speaking about something she understood. Stop the epinephrine compound for 6 hours. Monitor his neural activity closely, not just his heart rate. If I'm right, you'll see the brain wave patterns start to stabilize. If I'm wrong, his condition won't change, and you can restart the medication. And if you're wrong, and those 6 hours cause more damage, then I'll be responsible, Amira said. But Mr. Vitale, with respect, every treatment they've tried has failed. What's one more attempt? Lorenzo was quiet for a long time. Rosa could hear her own breathing, loud in the silence. She wanted to tell Amira to take it back, to apologize, to run. But she also knew her daughter was right. How many times had Rosa herself seen doctors miss something simple because they were too focused on the complex? Finally, Lorenzo spoke. Dr. Hale, you're supervising this. The girl gets 1 hour to observe my son's vitals. Not 6 hours, one. If there's even the slightest improvement, we continue. If not, we return to the previous treatment plan. Understood. Yes, sir, Nathan said. And you? Lorenzo looked at Amira. If you're wrong, you walk away and never speak of this again. If you're right, he paused. If you're right, we'll discuss what happens next. Rosa didn't like the sound of that, but she nodded. What choice did they have? 20 minutes later, Amira stood in Matteo Vitale's room, wearing a visitor's gown over her school uniform. Rosa stood behind her, praying silently to every saint she could remember. Nathan was at the computer terminal, pulling up the detailed monitoring data. Matteo looked so small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires covering his body. He was 14, Rosa knew, but he looked younger in his unconscious state. His skin had a grayish tint, and his breathing was assisted by a ventilator. Rosa felt a pang of sympathy. Whatever his father was, this was just a sick child. The epinephrine compound has been discontinued, Nathan said. We're now monitoring pure vital functions. Amira moved closer to the bed, her eyes scanning the monitors. Rosa watched her daughter's face, seeing the intense concentration there. Minutes ticked by. Lorenzo stood by the window, his back to them, but Rosa could feel the tension radiating from him. There, Amira said suddenly. She pointed to one of the monitors. His neural activity just shifted. The delta waves are becoming more regular. Nathan checked the screen. She's right. The pattern is changing. What does that mean? Lorenzo asked without turning around. It means, Amira said carefully, that without the medication interfering, his brain is starting to regulate itself better. Whatever's in his system is still there, but it's not being amplified anymore. His heart rate is steadying, Nathan added, checking another monitor. Blood pressure is equalizing. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The improvements were subtle, but measurable. Matteo's color improved slightly. His breathing, though still assisted, became more regular. Lorenzo finally turned around. How is this possible? It's not a cure, Amira said quickly. The toxin, whatever it is still in his system. But we stopped making it worse. Now we need to identify exactly what it is so we can neutralize it. And how do we do that? Amira looked at Nathan, then back at Lorenzo. We need to do a full spectrum analysis of his blood, looking for unusual compounds. Not just a standard tox screen, but a comprehensive chemical analysis. It'll be expensive and time-consuming. Money isn't an issue, Lorenzo said flatly. Time might be. Can you identify what to look for? I can try. If I can access the medical database, research similar cases, compare symptoms and outcomes. Whatever you need, Lorenzo said. Then his eyes shifted to Rosa. Your daughter has 1 hour to show improvement. She's shown it. Now she has as much time as necessary to save my son. Rosa felt dizzy. This wasn't what she wanted. Getting tangled up with Lorenzo Vitale, with his world of violence and power. But looking at Amira's face, seeing the hope and determination there, she knew there was no going back now. Thank you, Mr. Vitale, Amira said softly. Don't thank me yet, Lorenzo replied. Just save him. As they left Mateo's room, Rosa heard footsteps approaching rapidly. Dr. Valdez, the senior physician who'd been overseeing Mateo's care, came striding down the hallway. His face was red with anger. Mr. Vitale, I've just been informed that you've discontinued Mateo's heart medication based on the advice of... He stopped when he saw Amira. A child? The medication was making things worse, Lorenzo said calmly. As this young woman correctly identified. That's absurd. The epinephrine compound is standard protocol for patients with cardiac instability. Whoever told you otherwise is spreading dangerous misinformation. Then explain why my son's vitals have improved in the last hour, Lorenzo said. Valdez sputtered. Correlation isn't causation. Any temporary improvement could be coincidence, or the result of the cumulative effects of our treatment plan finally taking hold. Or, Amira said quietly, it could be that you've been treating symptoms instead of causes. With respect, Dr. Valdez, has anyone considered that Mateo might be suffering from synthetic neurotoxin? Something that wouldn't show up on standard screenings? Valdez stared at her, as if she'd started speaking in tongues. A neurotoxin. Based on what diagnosis? What training qualifies you to make such an assessment? Based on observation and research, Amira said. The pattern of organ failure, the neural degradation, the way his body responds to certain medications, it all points to a synthetic compound, possibly something derived from research into South American plant toxins. South American plant toxins, Valdez repeated slowly. And you determine this how? Through your extensive medical education. Rosa saw the condescension in his voice, the way he looked at her daughter, as if she were something he'd scrape off his shoe. She'd seen that look before, directed at herself, at other black women who dared to speak up or think above their station. I've determined it through reading and observation, Amira said, her voice steady despite the heat Rosa could see building in her eyes. The symptoms align with documented cases of poisoning from compounds like curare derivatives but modified. The way the toxin is affecting the acetylcholine receptors suggests a synthetic enhancement. Enough. Valdez cut her off. Mr. Vitale, I strongly urge you not to let your desperation cloud your judgment. This girl, however well-meaning, is not qualified to treat your son. If you continue down this path, you're risking his life on the theories of someone who learned medicine from discarded magazines. The insult hung in the air. Rosa felt her face burn with shame and anger. But before she could speak, Amira stepped forward. You're right that I'm not qualified, she said. I have no medical degree, no license, no formal training. But I do have something you don't seem to have right now, Dr. Valdez. I have the ability to look at this case with fresh eyes. You and your colleagues have been approaching this the same way for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and Mateo is getting worse. Maybe it's time to try something different. Insolent, Valdez began. She's right, Lorenzo said quietly, and everyone went silent. 3 weeks, 100 doctors, and my son is dying. This girl has shown more insight in 1 hour than all of you have in 21 days. So here's what's going to happen, Dr. Valdez. You're going to order the comprehensive blood analysis she recommended. You're going to give her access to whatever medical resources she needs. And you're going to treat her with respect. Or, Valdez's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. Or I'll find a hospital that will, Lorenzo said simply. Along with a new chief of surgery and a board of directors who understand that results matter more than pride. Valdez's jaw clenched. For a moment, Rosa thought he might refuse, might storm off and let his reputation take the hit. But he was a practical man, she could see that. He valued his position more than his pride. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll order the tests. But when this wild theory proves to be nothing, I expect a formal apology. And when it proves to be correct," Amira said quietly, "I expect you to listen to the next person who might see something you've missed, regardless of where they come from." Valdez turned and strode away, his white coat billowing behind him like a flag of retreat. Nathan let out a breath he'd been holding. "Well," he said, "that was intense." Lorenzo looked at Amira with something that might have been respect. "You're either very brave or very foolish, girl." "Probably both," Amira admitted. "But I'm also right." "We'll see," Lorenzo said. "Dr. Hale, make sure she has access to whatever she needs. Mrs. Williams, your daughter will be working late tonight. I'm providing security to ensure she's not disturbed, and to ensure she stays safe." The last part sent a chill down Rosa's spine. It could have been protective. It could have been a threat. With a man like Lorenzo Vitale, the line between the two was razor thin. As Lorenzo walked away, his security following, Rosa pulled Amira aside. "Baby, are you sure about this? We can still walk away." "Mom, I can't walk away. That boy is dying. If I can help him, I have to try." "But Lorenzo Vitale, I know who he is. I know what he is. But his son didn't choose to be born into that life. Matteo doesn't deserve to die because of who his father is." Rosa looked at her brilliant, compassionate daughter and felt her heart break and swell at the same time. "What did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Amira said, squeezing her mother's hand. "From a woman who's been invisible for 12 years, but never let it make her small. You taught me that everyone deserves dignity, Mom. Everyone deserves a chance, even the son of a monster." Rosa pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "You're going to change the world someday, baby. Let's start with saving one life," Amira said. "Then we'll see about the rest." The evening after Amira's confrontation with Dr. Valdez had stretched into night, and night had given way to the quiet hours when hospitals felt most like tombs. Rosa had gone home reluctantly, only after Lorenzo assured her that armed guards would remain outside whatever room Amira occupied. Now, at 2 in the morning, Amira stood in the hospital's restricted research laboratory with Nathan by her side, both of them wearing white coats that were several sizes too large. "You know, we could both lose everything if anyone finds out about this," Nathan whispered, swiping his access card to unlock the blood analysis equipment. "Then we better not get caught," Amira replied, carefully extracting a vial of Matteo's blood from the secure refrigeration unit. Her hands were steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. This was breaking about 15 different hospital regulations, not to mention federal privacy laws. Nathan pulled up the analysis software on the computer terminal. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Anything that shouldn't be there. The standard toxicology panel test for maybe 300 compounds. We're going to run a full mass spectrometry analysis. It'll show us everything in his blood at the molecular level. That'll take hours to process. Then we better get started." They worked in silence, preparing the sample and loading it into the machine. The equipment hummed to life, its display showing the complex dance of molecules being separated and identified. Amira pulled up a chair and opened her notebook, comparing Matteo's symptoms with similar cases she'd read about. "There was a case in Colombia 5 years ago," she said, half to herself. "A politician's daughter, same symptoms. Organ failure, neurological decline, no identifiable cause. She died before they figured it out." "That's encouraging," Nathan muttered. "But there was an autopsy. They found traces of a synthetic compound in her spinal fluid, something that had been engineered to mimic natural toxins, but with enhanced potency. The researchers who published the paper theorized it was developed for military applications." Nathan stopped typing and looked at her. "You think someone poisoned Matteo with a military-grade neurotoxin?" "I think someone poisoned him with something that doesn't exist in nature. Whether it's military or not, I don't know. But it's intentional. This wasn't an accident." The implications of what she was saying settled over them like a heavy blanket. If Matteo had been deliberately poisoned, then someone wanted him dead. Someone with access to highly specialized compounds. Someone who knew enough about medicine to make it look like a natural illness. The computer beeped. Initial results were appearing on the screen, line after line of chemical formulas and molecular structures. Most of them were normal, expected components of human blood. But then Amira saw it. There, she pointed. That compound. It doesn't match anything in the medical database. Nathan zoomed in on the molecular structure. It was complex, with unusual bonding patterns that suggested artificial synthesis. You're right. The computer is flagging it as unknown. But look at this part here. He highlighted a section of the molecule. This structure is similar to batrachotoxin, the poison dart frogs produce. But it's been modified, enhanced somehow. Can we cross-reference it with research databases? Scientific publications, patent filings, anything? Nathan's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm searching now, but Amira, if this is classified military research, it might not be in any public database. Try pharmaceutical research then. Private biotech companies. Someone developed this, which means someone published something about it, even if it was internal documentation. Minutes ticked by as the computer searched through thousands of documents. Finally, a hit appeared. A research paper from 2014, published in an obscure journal of experimental toxicology. The title read, Synthetic Enhancement of Natural Neurotoxins for Potential Therapeutic Applications. Amira's blood ran cold as she read the abstract. The paper described the development of modified toxins that could cross the blood-brain barrier more efficiently than natural compounds. The stated purpose was to develop better treatments for neurological disorders, but the implications were darker. A toxin this potent could kill without leaving obvious traces. Look at the funding source, Nathan said, his voice tight. Amira scrolled to the bottom of the paper. The research had been funded by a biotech company called Phoenix Solutions, and the principal investigator was listed as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Ph.D. in biochemistry. Phoenix Solutions, Amira repeated. I need to find out more about this company. Amira, if this is what I think it is, we need to be very careful. Companies that develop compounds like this don't just let their secrets walk out the door. But Amira was already searching, pulling up corporate records and news articles. Phoenix Solutions had been a small biotech startup based in Delaware, focused on pharmaceutical research. But in 2015, just a year after that paper was published, the company had dissolved. Assets sold, employees scattered, all records sealed by court order. Why would a company shut down right after a successful research project? Amira wondered aloud. Maybe it wasn't successful. Maybe something went wrong. Amira kept digging, searching for any mention of Phoenix Solutions or Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Then she found it. A small news article from a local Delaware paper dated March 2015. The headline read, Biotech Researcher Dies in Laboratory Accident. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had died in an explosion at the Phoenix Solutions facility. The official report called it a gas leak, a tragic accident. The company had closed its doors 3 months later, citing financial difficulties and loss of key personnel. This doesn't make sense, Amira said. A researcher dies, a company closes, and all their work just disappears. Unless someone didn't want that work to see the light of day, Nathan said grimly. Amira, I think we need to tell someone about this. The police, the FBI, someone. And tell them what? That we illegally accessed hospital records and ran unauthorized tests? That we broke into restricted databases? We'd be arrested before we could explain anything. Then what do? Before Amira could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Call me. Important. Amira stepped out into the hallway to make the call, keeping her voice low. Mom? What's wrong? Rosa's voice was shaky. Baby, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. What is it? Phoenix Solutions. You mentioned the name earlier today when you were researching. I know that company, Amira. I used to work there. Amira's grip tightened on the phone. What? Before I was a cleaning lady, I worked as a lab assistant at Phoenix Solutions. It was supposed to be my big break, a chance to work in real science instead of just reading about it. But the things I saw there, Rosa's voice cracked. They weren't developing medicine, baby. They were developing weapons. Poisons disguised as pharmaceutical research. Mom, Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because I was scared. When I realized what they were doing, I tried to report it. I went to Dr. Mitchell, told her we needed to shut down the neurotoxin project. She agreed with me, said she'd been having doubts too. But 2 days later, she was dead. And the men who ran that company made it very clear that if I ever spoke about what I saw, I'd end up the same way. Amira felt dizzy. Her mother, her quiet, invisible mother, had been involved in all of this. So you ran. I took you and I ran. I became a cleaning lady because nobody looks at cleaning ladies. Nobody asks questions. I thought if I made myself small enough, they'd forget about me. Mom, who ran Phoenix Solutions? Who were the men who threatened you? Rosa was quiet for a long moment. I don't know all of them, but I know they had connections. Money. Power. And one of the investors, she hesitated. One of the investors was a shell company traced back to Lorenzo Vitale. The world tilted beneath Amira's feet. Lorenzo had funded the research that created the poison now killing his son. The terrible irony of it crashed over her in waves. Does Lorenzo know? Amira asked. I don't think so. These men, they hide behind layers of corporations and paperwork. He probably had no idea what his money was funding. But Amira, if anyone finds out that I knew about this. Mom, listen to me. We're going to fix this. But I need you to remember everything you can about Phoenix Solutions. The people who worked there, the research they were doing, anything that might help us identify who actually poisoned Mateo. Amira, maybe we should just walk away. These people killed Dr. Mitchell. They could kill you too. If we walk away, Mateo dies. And whoever did this gets away with it. I can't let that happen, Mom. I won't. After hanging up, Amira returned to the lab where Nathan was printing out the analysis results. She told him everything her mother had revealed, watching his face grow paler with each word. This is bigger than we thought, Nathan said. If Lorenzo's money funded the research, and someone from that project is now using the toxin against his son, it's revenge, Amira finished. Someone with a grudge against Lorenzo, using his own weapon against him. We need to tell him. Not yet. Not until we know who. If we tell Lorenzo now, he'll tear the city apart looking for answers. People vildi. We need proof first. They spent the next 2 hours compiling everything they'd found. The molecular analysis, the research paper, the connection to Phoenix Solutions. Amira created a timeline, trying to piece together who might have had access to the toxin and the means to administer it to Mateo. As dawn broke through the laboratory windows, Nathan finally asked the question that had been hanging between them. Can you actually cure him? Even if we identify the toxin, do you know how to neutralize it? I have an idea, Amira said. The toxin works by disrupting neural signals. But if we can synthesize a compound that blocks the receptors the toxin is targeting, we might be able to stop the damage and give his body time to flush out the poison naturally. That would require accessing compounds we don't have here, and testing on a human patient without approval. I know the risks. But Nathan, we're out of time. Mateo's kidneys are failing. Another week and the damage will be irreversible. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. You're serious about this? About saving him? Of course I am. Even though his father is a criminal, even though Lorenzo Vitale has probably hurt more people than we can count. Amira met his gaze steadily. Mateo isn't his father. He's just a sick kid who deserves a chance to live. That's all that matters to me. Nathan nodded slowly. Okay, then let's save him. 3 days later, Amira found herself standing in Lorenzo Vitale's mansion, surrounded by opulence she'd only ever seen in movies. Rosa stood beside her, both of them looking utterly out of place among the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Lorenzo had insisted they stay here for security reasons, but Amira suspected it was also about control. He wanted them close, where he could watch them. Mateo had been moved to a private medical suite within the mansion, complete with all the monitoring equipment from the hospital. It was Nathan who had suggested it after Amira discovered evidence of tampering with Mateo's 4 fluids. Someone at St. Carlen's was actively trying to kill the boy. Whoever's doing this has inside access, Amira had told Lorenzo. They're reintroducing the toxin through his medications. Every time we make progress, they sabotage it. Lorenzo's response had been swift and brutal. Within hours, Matteo was home, and every staff member who'd had access to his room was being investigated. Now, in the relative safety of the mansion, Amira could focus on developing her cure. The home medical suite was impressive, though not quite as well-equipped as the hospital lab. Nathan had managed to smuggle out some essential compounds, risking his career and possibly his freedom to help her. Amira worked late into the night, synthesizing her antitoxin using what she had available. The formula was based on the molecular structure of the poison itself. If she could create a compound that fit into the same neuroreceptors but without the toxic effect, it would essentially block the poison from causing further damage. The human body was remarkably good at healing itself, given time. All Amira needed to do was buy Matteo that time. On the fourth night in the mansion, as Amira was adjusting her formula for the third time, Rosa came to check on her. Her mother looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from worry and sleepless nights. "Baby, you need to rest. I will once I get this right." Rosa sat down beside her. "I've been thinking about Phoenix Solutions, about the people who work there. And there was a nurse, Janet Brennan. She administered medications during the trials. She was always uncomfortable with what we were doing, asking questions about ethics and safety. After Dr. Mitchell died, she disappeared. I assumed she'd quit like everyone else." "A nurse," Amira said slowly. "Mom, nurses have access to patient medications. They could easily tamper with and without anyone noticing. You think Janet might be behind this? I think we need to find out where she is now." The next morning, Amira asked Nathan to run a search for Janet Brennan. What he found made Amira's blood run cold. Janet Brennan had been working at St. Carlen's Hospital for the past 3 years. In the intensive care unit, she'd been one of the nurses regularly assigned to Matteo's care. "We need to tell Lorenzo," Nathan said urgently. But before Amira could respond, an alarm shrieked through the mansion. One of Matteo's monitors was going haywire. Amira ran to his room, Rosa and Nathan close behind her. Matteo was convulsing, his body rigid with seizures. "What's happening?" Lorenzo demanded, appearing in the doorway with 3 of his guards. "Amira, check the 4-bag. Someone's tampered with it. The fluid's been contaminated with more of the toxin." "That's impossible. No one's been in this room except medical staff I personally vetted." "Then someone on your vetted staff is the traitor." Amira disconnected the 4 immediately, her hands steady despite the chaos. "Nathan, I need the emergency medications. Now." As Nathan rushed to comply, Amira began working to stabilize Matteo. The boy's lips were turning blue, his breathing shallow. She had minutes, maybe less. "Lorenzo, I need you to trust me," Amira said, drawing up her experimental antitoxin into a syringe. "This is the formula I've been working on. It's not finished, not tested, but it's the only chance he has right now." Lorenzo looked at the syringe, then at his dying son, then at Amira. "If he dies, if I do nothing, he definitely dies. This way, he has a chance." For a long moment, Lorenzo said nothing. Then, quietly, "Do it." Amira injected the antitoxin directly into Matteo's bloodstream and held her breath. For 10 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the convulsions began to ease. His breathing deepened. The monitor showed his heart rate starting to stabilize. "It's working," Nathan breathed. But Amira wasn't celebrating yet. The antitoxin was only temporary, only buying time. "We need to find whoever contaminated that 4. If they did it once, they'll try again." Lorenzo's face had gone cold with fury. "Gather everyone who's been in this room in the last 24 hours. Doctors, nurses, security, cleaning staff. Everyone." Within an hour, 15 people stood in Lorenzo's study, all of them looking terrified. Lorenzo paced in front of them like a predator sizing up prey. "One of you is trying to kill my son. One of you has been contaminating his medications, sabotaging his treatment. I want that person to step forward now." Silence. Fear hung thick in the air. "No one." Lorenzo's voice was soft, dangerous. "Then we'll do this the hard way." He nodded to his guards, who began separating people into different rooms. "You'll each be questioned, your backgrounds checked. Your bank account's examined. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. If you're guilty, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Amira watched as a young nurse began to cry. She was new, barely out of nursing school, clearly terrified of Lorenzo. But Amira's attention was drawn to another nurse, older, standing very still in the back. Her badge read Janet Brennan. Their eyes met across the room, and Amira saw recognition there. Janet knew she'd been discovered. What happened next felt like slow motion. Janet's hand moved to her pocket, pulling out something small and dark. A vial. Before anyone could react, she uncapped it and raised it to her lips. No. Amira lunged forward, but she was too far away. Janet swallowed the contents of the vial and collapsed, her body already convulsing from the poison. Nathan reached her first, trying to stabilize her, but it was clear within seconds that there was nothing to be done. Janet Brennan had poisoned herself with the same toxin she'd been using on Mateo. Within 2 minutes, she was dead. The room erupted in chaos. Lorenzo's guards surrounded the body. Rosa pulled Amira close, both of them shaking. Nathan sat back on his heels, his face pale with shock. Lorenzo stood over Janet's body, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the noise. Search her. Find out who she was working for. A guard went through Janet's pockets, pulling out her phone, her wallet, and a small folded piece of paper. He handed the paper to Lorenzo, who read it and then looked at Amira. It's for you, he said quietly. Amira took the paper with trembling hands. The message was written in shaky handwriting, as if penned in haste. I'm sorry. They said it would be quick, that he wouldn't suffer. They said Lorenzo Vitale deserved to watch his son die the way my sister watched her daughter die. Phoenix Solutions tested on children. Your mother tried to stop it, but Dr. Mitchell silenced her. They killed Sarah for trying to expose the truth. I'm finishing what she started. The real monsters are still out there. Amira looked up at Lorenzo. Her sister's daughter was one of the children tested on at Phoenix Solutions. This wasn't just about revenge against you. This was about justice for what happened there. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Justice? She was murdering my son. She was hurting you the way she'd been hurt. I'm not saying it's right, but I understand it. Amira met his gaze steadily. Your money funded the research that killed innocent children. You didn't know, but your money still paid for it. I built my empire on many sins, Lorenzo said slowly. But I never killed children. No, but the people you funded did. And now we know the truth. Phoenix Solutions was doing illegal human testing. Janet's sister must have worked there, must have lost her daughter to those experiments. When she found out you were one of the investors, she decided to make me suffer the same way. Lorenzo looked at his son, still unconscious but stable, and she nearly succeeded. Rosa spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. I tried to stop them. Back in 2015, I tried to tell anyone who would listen. But they fired me, threatened me, made sure I could never work in science again. I became invisible to protect my daughter from the same fate. Lorenzo turned to Rosa, really seeing her for the first time. You were the whistleblower, the one who tried to expose Phoenix Solutions before Dr. Mitchell died. Yes, and they destroyed my life for it. Yet here you are, Lorenzo said. Your daughter, using the brilliance you clearly passed on to her, saving the son of the man whose money helped ruin you. Why? Because, Rosa said simply, someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to choose to heal instead of hurt. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Mateo, at the monitors showing steady vital signs, at the empty syringe that held Amira's experimental cure. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. I built empires. I controlled industries. I made men fear my name. But I couldn't fix my own blood. He turned to Amira. You saved him when 100 experts failed. You saved him even knowing what my money did. Why? Because Mateo isn't you, Amira said. He deserves a chance to be better than all of this. Better than Phoenix Solutions. Better than revenge. Better than the sins of people who came before him. And can you finish what you started? Can you cure him completely? Amira looked at the formula she'd been developing, at the notes scattered across the table, at her mother's tired but proud face. Yes, she said. But when I do, the truth about Phoenix Solutions comes out. All of it. The illegal testing, the deaths, the cover-up. Everything. Even my involvement. Especially that. The only way to truly heal is to expose the poison at its root. Lorenzo nodded slowly. Then do it. Save my son, and then burn it all down. I'll face whatever consequences come. For once in my life, I'll face the truth. After Janet Brennan's death, the mansion fell into an uneasy silence. Amira worked through the night, refining her antitoxin, testing and retesting the formula, until her eyes burned with exhaustion. Rosa brought her tea and sandwiches that went cold and untouched. Nathan stayed by her side, double-checking her calculations, offering quiet encouragement when her hands shook from fatigue. It was dawn on the 6th day when Mateo's eyelids began to flutter. Amira had been adjusting his fore when she noticed it. A small movement, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Nathan," she whispered urgently. "Look." Nathan rushed to the bedside. They watched together as Mateo's eyes moved beneath his closed lids, the rapid eye movement of someone surfacing from deep sleep. His fingers twitched. His breathing pattern changed, becoming more conscious, more purposeful. "He's waking up," Nathan breathed. "Amira, he's actually waking up." Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by instinct. He must have been sleeping nearby, waiting for this moment. His hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled. He looked more human than Amira had ever seen him. "Mateo." Lorenzo moved to his son's bedside, his voice breaking on the name. "Can you hear me, son?" Mateo's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing. He blinked several times, his gaze roaming the room before finally settling on his father's face. His lips moved, forming words without sound. "Don't try to talk yet," Amira said gently, checking his vital signs. "Your body is still recovering. You've been unconscious for almost a month." But Mateo ignored her, his attention fixed on Lorenzo. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from weeks of intubation. "Dad!" Lorenzo's composure shattered. He gripped his son's hand, tears streaming down his face without shame. "I'm here. I'm right here. I heard you," Mateo said softly. "When I was asleep, I heard you talking to me. You said you were sorry. You said you'd do better." "I meant it," Lorenzo said. Every word. Mateo's gaze drifted to Amira, studying her with curiosity. "You were here too. I remember your voice. You read to me. Medical stuff I didn't understand, but your voice was kind." Amira felt her eyes well up. She'd spend hours by Mateo's bedside, reading her research aloud, partly to organize her thoughts and partly because she'd read that coma patients could sometimes hear. She hadn't known if it was true until now. "I'm Amira," she said. "I've been trying to help you get better. My dad said you saved my life. That you're smarter than all the fancy doctors." A weak smile crossed his face. "Thanks." Before Amira could respond, Rosa burst into the room, having heard the commotion from down the hall. She took one look at Mateo's open eyes and pressed her hand to her mouth, crying with relief. Nathan was already on his phone, documenting the moment, recording the vital signs that proved what they'd accomplished. "This is incredible," Nathan said. "His neural activity is normalizing. Kidney function is improving. It's like his body is rebooting itself. The antitoxin is working," Amira explained, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. "By blocking the toxin's effects, we gave his system time to start healing naturally. He'll need continued treatment, physical therapy, monitoring, but he's going to recover." Lorenzo looked at her with something approaching reverence. "You did the impossible." "No," Amira said quietly. "I just refused to accept that it was impossible." Within hours, news of Mateo's awakening had leaked beyond the mansion walls. Amira never discovered who told the media, whether it was a staff member looking for quick money or someone with more calculated motives. By afternoon, news vans lined the street outside Lorenzo's estate, cameras pointed at every window, reporters shouting questions at anyone who passed. "Teen scientist saves MAFIA heir after 100 doctors failed," read one headline. "Cleaning lady's daughter performs medical miracle declared another. Amira's name was everywhere, her school photo plastered across every news site and television screen. Rosa watched the coverage with growing dread. This isn't good, baby. All this attention, all these people knowing who you are. Mom, it'll blow over. People will forget. People like us don't get to have miracles without consequences, Rosa said. You've embarrassed powerful people. The medical establishment, the hospital board, everyone who said you couldn't do it. They're not going to just let this go. She was right. By evening, Dr. Valdez had called a press conference at St. Carlen's Hospital. Amira watched on television as he stood before a podium, his face a mask of professional concern. While we're all relieved that young Matteo Vitale is recovering, Valdez said smoothly, we must address serious concerns about the methods used. Rosa Williams, despite her good intentions, has no medical license, no formal training, and no legal authority to administer experimental treatments. What happened was reckless and dangerous, and could have easily resulted in tragedy. But it didn't result in tragedy, a reporter called out. It resulted in a cure. By pure luck, Valdez countered. Medical science requires rigorous testing, peer review, clinical trials. You cannot simply inject patients with untested compounds based on theories scribbled in a notebook. The hospital board is currently reviewing how this situation was allowed to occur, and we will be implementing stricter protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. Amira watched him twist the narrative, making her look reckless instead of brilliant, dangerous instead of brave. Nathan, sitting beside her, slammed his laptop shut in disgust. He's covering his own incompetence by making you the villain, Nathan said. This is garbage. It's strategy, Lorenzo said from the doorway. He knows the truth makes him look bad, so he's rewriting history. He's good at it too. By tomorrow, half the country will think you got lucky instead of being brilliant. So what do? Amira asked. We fight back with the truth. All of it. Lorenzo's expression hardened. It's time to expose Phoenix Solutions, the illegal testing, the deaths. Everything. If they want to attack you, they'll have to do it while the spotlight is on them too. But before they could formulate a plan, the police arrived. 6 officers with a warrant for Rosa's arrest, accusing her of stealing hospital supplies and facilitating unlicensed medical practice. The charges were clearly fabricated, but that didn't matter. Within minutes, Rosa was in handcuffs, being led to a patrol car, while Amira screamed and fought to reach her mother. Mom! No, you can't take her. She didn't do anything wrong. Amira, it's okay, Rosa called back, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Don't fight them, baby. Just stay safe. Lorenzo's guards moved to intervene, but Lorenzo held up a hand, stopping them. Let them take her. Fighting now will only make it worse. Make it worse. Amira rounded on him, fury replacing shock. They're arresting my mother for crimes she didn't commit. I know. And Valdez is behind it, using his connections to retaliate. But if my men interfere with police, it gives him more ammunition. We play this smart, not violent. How is letting them take her smart? Because I have lawyers. Good ones. Rosa will be out on bail within hours, and when she is, we'll have grounds to sue for false arrest. Valdez is overplaying his hand. Let him. Amira wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the injustice of it all, but she knew Lorenzo was right. Her mother had taught her that sometimes you had to take a blow to land a stronger one later. So she watched the police car drive away, carrying the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her. That night, Amira was placed under house arrest at Lorenzo's mansion, supposedly for her own protection, but feeling more like captivity. Lorenzo had made it clear that Valdez wouldn't stop at Rosa's arrest. There would be more attacks, more attempts to discredit and destroy them. The hospital board is meeting tomorrow, Nathan reported, having snuck into the mansion through a service entrance. They're planning to issue a statement condemning your actions and recommending criminal charges for practicing medicine without a license. Let them, Amira said bitterly. I saved a boy's life. They can condemn me all they want. There's more, Nathan hesitated. I found something in the hospital's archive files. Records showing that St. Carlen's received significant funding from Phoenix Solutions back in 2014. The hospital wasn't just connected to the research, they were complicit in it. That's why they're so desperate to bury this story. If the truth about Phoenix Solutions comes out, it exposes them too. Amira felt pieces clicking into place. That's why Valdez is so invested in destroying my credibility. He's not just protecting his ego. He's protecting the hospital's reputation. And probably his own involvement, Nathan added. I checked his employment history. He was head of research at St. Carlen's when Phoenix Solutions was operational. There's no way he didn't know what was happening. Before Amira could process this revelation, Mateo called out from his room. She rushed to his bedside, finding him sitting up slightly, more alert than he'd been that morning. I heard you talking, he said, about my dad's money funding the poison research. About everything that happened. Mateo, you should be resting. I'm tired of resting. I want to help. His young face was set with determination that reminded Amira painfully of his father. Everyone's attacking you for saving me. That's not right. I want to tell people what really happened. You're 14. The media will tear you apart. Let them try. Mateo's jaw set stubbornly. My dad might be a criminal, but I'm not. And I'm not going to hide while good people suffer for helping me. Amira felt a surge of affection for this brave kid who'd been through so much. Thank you, Mateo. But right now, the most important thing is that you focus on getting better. Is your mom okay? The lady who waited with you at the hospital? She's in jail because of me, Amira said, her voice breaking. Because I couldn't leave well enough alone. No, Mateo said firmly. She's in jail because bad people are scared of the truth. That's not your fault. His words, so simple and clear, cut through Amira's spiral of guilt. He was right. They hadn't done anything wrong. The only criminals here were the ones trying to silence them. Later that evening, Lorenzo returned with news. Rosa's been released on bail. I posted it personally. She'll be home within the hour. Thank you, Amira said, meaning it despite her complicated feelings about Lorenzo. Don't thank me. I'm the reason any of this happened. My money, my connections, my criminal empire, it all circles back to me. Lorenzo sat heavily in a chair, looking older than his years. I threatened to destroy the hospital board unless they dropped the charges against Rosa. They refused. They know I'm vulnerable right now, that any overt move I make will be used against me in court. So we're at a stalemate. For now. But Valdez won't stop. He'll keep coming after you, after your mother, until he's neutralized you as a threat. Then we need to strike first, Nathan said. He'd been quiet, working on his laptop. Now he turned the screen to show them what he'd compiled. A comprehensive dossier on Phoenix Solutions, complete with financial records, research notes, and photographs of the children who died during testing. I've been gathering evidence for days. Everything we need to expose the truth. We leak this to the press, and Valdez and the hospital go down with it. If we release this, there's no going back, Lorenzo warned. My name is all over these financial documents. I'll be arrested, probably within days. My empire will crumble. Everything I've built will be destroyed. Good, Amira said coldly. Maybe it should be. Lorenzo met her gaze and nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I face justice for all the things I've done. Before they could decide on their next move, the window exploded. Glass shattered inward as a bullet ripped through the room, passing inches from Amira's head and destroying the lamp beside her. Mateo screamed. Lorenzo threw himself over his son's body. Nathan tackled Amira to the ground as more gunshots erupted, tearing through walls and furniture. Stay down, Lorenzo roared, pulling a gun from beneath his jacket. His guards flooded into the room, returning fire toward the window. The mansion erupted into chaos, alarms blaring, security protocols activating. Amira lay pressed against the floor, her heart hammering, Nathan's weight pinning her in place. This was real. Someone was trying to kill her. The abstract danger she'd worried about had become bullets and blood and terror. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it started. Lorenzo's guards had driven the shooter back, their superior numbers and firepower forcing a retreat. Within minutes, they'd captured someone on the grounds, dragging a masked figure into the mansion. Lorenzo tore off the mask, revealing the face beneath. It was Marcus Webb, one of the hospital's security officers, the same man who controlled access to restricted areas. The same man who would have known exactly where Janet Brennan worked. "Who sent you?" Lorenzo demanded, his gun pressed against Marcus's temple. The cold, controlled criminal had vanished, replaced by a father whose son had just been endangered again. "I'm not telling you anything," Marcus spat. "Wrong answer." Lorenzo cocked the gun, and for a terrifying moment, Amira thought he would actually pull the trigger. But then Lorenzo lowered the weapon, his expression calculating. "Take him to the basement. Make him comfortable. Very comfortable." The guards dragged Marcus away, and Amira knew she didn't want to know what very comfortable meant in Lorenzo's world. She pulled herself to her feet, checking on Matteo. The boy was shaken but unhurt, clinging to his father. "This has to stop," Amira said, "before someone actually dies." "Someone already has," Lorenzo replied grimly. "Janet Brennan. And whoever's behind this won't stop until we're all silenced." Nathan was already on his phone. "I'm calling the police." "No," Lorenzo said sharply. "The police can't protect you from people with this level of reach." Marcus Webb had help. Someone told him where to shoot, when to shoot, how to get past my security. This goes deeper than one disgruntled security guard. "Then what do we do?" "We find out who's really pulling the strings," Lorenzo said. "And we end this. Tonight." In the basement, Marcus Webb proved surprisingly willing to talk once Lorenzo's men applied the right pressure. Amira didn't witness the interrogation, but she heard the screaming. It made her sick, but she also understood the necessity. Someone had just tried to kill her, had endangered a recovering 14-year-old boy. This wasn't about honor anymore. This was survival. When Lorenzo emerged an hour later, his expression was grim. Valdez paid him $10,000 to eliminate the evidence, meaning you. But Valdez wasn't working alone. He was following orders from someone higher up, someone on the hospital board with connections to Phoenix Solutions. "Who?" Amira demanded. "He doesn't know the name, but he knows they're planning something bigger. The assassination attempt was just the opening move. They're preparing to discredit you completely, to leak false information about your research, to make it look like you fabricated everything. They can't do that. We have evidence. They have money and power," Lorenzo interrupted. "They can do whatever they want unless we strike first." "Nathan, is that dossier ready?" "Yes, but if we release it now, without proper legal protection, we're out of time for proper legal anything," Lorenzo said. "Release it. Send it to every news outlet, every journalist, every social media platform you can think of. Flood the zone with truth before they can drown us in lies." Nathan looked at Amira, seeking permission. This was her decision, her mother's story, her discovery. Once they released this information, there would be no taking it back. Rosa could face retaliation. Nathan could lose his medical career. Lorenzo would certainly face prosecution. But Matteo was alive because she'd refused to back down. And if she backed down now, his recovery would be tainted by lies, and the children who died at Phoenix Solutions would remain forgotten. "Do it," Amira said. "Release everything." Nathan's fingers flew across his keyboard, uploading files, sending emails, posting documents. Within minutes, the truth about Phoenix Solutions was spreading across the internet like wildfire. Research documents showing illegal human testing, financial records tying Lorenzo Vitale and the hospital board to the project, photographs of the children who died, Dr. Sarah Mitchell's final report before her death, warning that the neurotoxin project had become too dangerous and needed to be shut down immediately. And at the center of it all, Rosa Williams' testimony. The whistleblower who tried to stop it 10 years ago and been silenced for her efforts. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted. News outlets scrambled to verify and report the story. Within an hour, protesters had gathered outside St. Carlen's Hospital, demanding answers. The hospital board issued a statement denying everything, but their denials rang hollow against the mountain of evidence. Dr. Valdez's name trended worldwide as people demanded his arrest. His face appeared on every screen, accompanied by damning documents and testimony. There would be no recovering from this for him. As Amira watched the story unfold on television, Rosa finally arrived home. Mother and daughter fell into each other's arms, both crying with relief and exhaustion. You did it, baby, Rosa whispered. You saved that boy and you exposed the truth. I'm so proud of you. We did it, Mom. This is your story as much as mine. No, Rosa said firmly, pulling back to look at her daughter. This is yours. You cleaned more than floors, baby. You cleaned history. You gave those children a voice. You gave me my voice back. Lorenzo watched them from across the room, his expression unreadable. It's done, he said quietly. The truth is out. Now we wait for the consequences. What will happen to you? Amira asked. Prison, most likely. My lawyers are already preparing for my arrest. But Mateo will be cared for. I've made arrangements. I'm not leaving you, Dad, Mateo said from the doorway, standing with Nathan's support. He was weak but determined. Whatever happens, we face it together. Lorenzo's eyes glistened with tears he didn't try to hide. You're a better man than I ever was, son. I had a good teacher, Mateo said. Eventually, as dawn broke over the mansion, Amira stood at the window, watching the media circus outside. Her phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, scholarship offers, research opportunities. The world wanted her story, wanted to celebrate her brilliance. But all Amira could think about was the cost. Janet Brennan, dead by her own hand. Rosa, facing potential criminal charges. Nathan, risking his career. Lorenzo, awaiting arrest. Marcus Webb, who tried to kill her, sitting in a police cell. The truth had set them free, but freedom came with a price she was only beginning to understand. The morning after they released the Phoenix Solutions files, Amira woke to find federal agents surrounding Lorenzo's mansion. Not local police, but FBI in dark suits with badges and warrants. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing exits, establishing perimeters, making it clear that nobody was leaving until they got what they came for. Lorenzo surrendered without resistance. Amira watched from an upstairs window as he walked out in handcuffs, his head held high, refusing to show weakness even in defeat. Mateo stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as his father was loaded into an unmarked vehicle. He knew this would happen, Mateo said quietly. He told me last night that when you expose the truth, everyone gets burned, even the ones trying to do right. I am sorry, Amira whispered. If I hadn't pushed so hard, then I'd be dead, Mateo interrupted. And those kids who died at Phoenix Solutions would still be forgotten. My dad made his choices a long time ago. This is just him finally paying for them. But Lorenzo's arrest was only the beginning. By noon, federal agents had expanded their investigation to include everyone connected to the Phoenix Solutions leak. That meant Amira, Rosa, and Nathan were all ordered to remain available for questioning. Not arrested, but not free either. Rosa held Amira's hand as they sat in Lorenzo's study, now occupied by Agent Sarah Castellano, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen everything and believed nothing. Let me make sure I understand, Castellano said, reviewing her notes. A 17-year-old girl with no medical training diagnosed and cured a condition that stumped over 100 specialists. Then uncovered a decade-old conspiracy involving illegal human experimentation. And you expect me to believe this happened organically? It's all documented, Nathan said, his voice tight with frustration. They've been over this for 3 hours. The research, the analysis, the treatment protocol. Everything Amira did is scientifically sound. Maybe, Castellano said, or maybe someone wanted this information public and used a sympathetic teenager as a vehicle. Someone with access to classified research. Someone who knew exactly what buttons to push. Are you suggesting Amira is some kind of plant? Rosa demanded. That she's working for someone? I'm suggesting this is all very convenient. Lorenzo Vitale gets exposed just as he's vulnerable. His criminal organization is dismantled. His assets frozen. Meanwhile, a feel-good story about a brilliant black girl saving a dying boy distracts from the bigger question. Who benefits from Vitale's fall? Amira felt cold realization wash over her. You don't care about Phoenix Solutions. You don't care about the children who died or the illegal testing. You're worried about who's taking over Lorenzo's territory. Castellano's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. I care about the truth, Miss Williams. And right now, your story feels incomplete. What would make it feel complete? Amira asked. What do you want from us? I want to know who else knew about Phoenix Solutions. Who else had access to that research? Because someone has been very carefully orchestrating events, and I don't think it's you. Before Amira could respond, Castellano's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. We're done here. Don't leave the city. She left abruptly, her team following. Through the window, Amira saw them conferring urgently, phones pressed to ears, expressions grim. Something had happened. Something big. Nathan checked his phone and cursed. Dr. Valdez. He's gone. What do you mean gone? Missing. He was supposed to appear before the medical board this morning. Never showed up. His house is empty. His car is at the airport, but he's not on any flight manifests. Rosa stood, her face tight with worry. They got to him. Whoever's behind Phoenix Solutions, they're cleaning house. Or he ran, Nathan suggested. Knew he couldn't fight the evidence, so he disappeared. But Amira didn't think so. Valdez had been arrogant, prideful, convinced he could spin any story in his favor. Men like that didn't run. They fought, even when fighting was futile, which meant someone had made him disappear. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of tension and uncertainty. News coverage of the Phoenix Solutions scandal dominated every channel, but the story was evolving in ways Amira hadn't anticipated. Initially, the focus had been on the illegal testing, the deaths, the cover-up, but now new narratives were emerging. Government officials deny knowledge of Phoenix Solutions research, one anchor reported. Despite documentation showing federal funding for the project, the Department of Defense claims no involvement in the neurotoxin development. Another channel showed protesters outside federal buildings. Questions are being raised about how much the government knew and when. Were they complicit in illegal human testing? Did they weaponize the research for military purposes? And then the darker stories began. Opinion pieces questioning Amira's motives. Social media campaigns suggesting she'd fabricated evidence. Anonymous sources claiming the whole thing was a hoax designed to take down Lorenzo Vitale and embarrass the medical establishment. Look at this garbage, Nathan said, scrolling through his tablet. They're calling you a fraud, saying you got lucky and are now claiming credit for a miracle that never happened. Mateo is walking around upstairs. Amira said, That's not luck. That's not fraud. That's real. Tell that to these people. Nathan showed her a thread of comments, hundreds of posts from accounts that seemed coordinated, all pushing the same message. Rosa Williams is a liar. The cure is fake. The conspiracy is fiction. It's a disinformation campaign, Rosa said, reading over their shoulders. Professional, expensive, organized. Someone is spending serious money to destroy your credibility. The same someone who made Valdez disappear, Amira said. The same someone who ordered Marcus Webb to kill me. They're still out there, and we still don't know who they are. That night, Nathan received an encrypted message through a secure channel he'd set up for whistleblowers. The message was brief, but explosive. Phoenix Solutions research was commissioned by a Black Ops division within the Department of Defense. Project codename, Shadow Scalpel. Primary objective, develop undetectable assassination tool for high-value targets. Civilian testing was unauthorized but known to supervisors. I have proof. Meet me. The message included coordinates for a warehouse district on the outskirts of the city and a time, midnight. It's obviously a trap, Rosa said immediately. Or it's our chance to get real answers, Nathan countered. Either way, I'm going, Amira said. We need to know who's behind this. No, Rosa grabbed her daughter's arm. Baby, they've already tried to kill you once. You go to that warehouse, you might not come back. Mom, if we don't go, this never ends. They'll keep coming after us, keep attacking our credibility, until nobody believes anything we say. This is our shot at proof that clears everything up. Then I'm coming with you, Rosa said firmly. They argued for an hour before reaching a compromise. Nathan would go to the meeting alone, wearing a wire that would transmit to Amira and Rosa waiting in a car nearby. If anything went wrong, they'd call the police immediately. At 11:30 that night, they drove to the warehouse district. Nathan parked 3 blocks from the coordinates, giving Amira the receiver for his wire before walking into the darkness alone. Amira sat in the driver's seat, her mother beside her, both of them listening to Nathan's breathing through the earpiece. She heard his footsteps echo in empty streets, heard the creak of a door opening. "Hello." Nathan's voice was steady. "I'm here. Where are you?" For a long moment, only silence. Then a woman's voice, distorted by electronic modification. "Dr. Hale. You came alone." "Yes. You said you have proof about Shadow Scalpel." "I have more than proof. I have the original research files, the authorization documents, everything you need to expose the government's involvement. Why give them to me? Why not go to the press yourself?" "Because I'm dead if they know who I am." "But you've already put yourselves in the spotlight. You're protected by visibility. What are you going to do, Dr. Hale? What will you do with this information once you have it?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I'll make sure the truth comes out, that the people responsible face justice." "Justice?" The woman's laugh was bitter. "There's no justice for people like us. Only consequences. Here." Amira heard rustling, the sound of something being handed over. "This is everything?" Nathan asked. "Everything that matters. The rest is—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Not the natural end of a conversation, but a sudden termination. Amira's blood ran cold. "Nathan," she said into the microphone. "Nathan, can you hear me?" Static. Then nothing. "Something's wrong," Rosa said. "Call the police. Now." But before Amira could dial, headlights flooded the car from behind. Multiple vehicles moving fast, boxing them in. Armed men emerged, wearing tactical gear, but no badges, no identification. "Out of the car," one commanded. "Hands where we can see them." Amira and Rosa were pulled from the vehicle, their phones confiscated. They were pushed into a van, hoods placed over their heads. Amira's heart hammered with terror. This was it. They'd walked straight into a trap, and now they were going to disappear just like Valdez. The van drove for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. When the hoods were finally removed, Amira found herself in a sterile conference room. Rosa sat beside her, scared but trying to appear brave. And across the table sat Agent Castellano, along with a man in a military uniform covered in medals Amira didn't recognize. "Sorry for the drama," Castellano said, not sounding sorry at all. "But we couldn't risk being observed. Your friend Dr. Hale is fine, by the way. He's in another room, also not under arrest." "Then what is this?" Amira demanded. The military man leaned forward. "This is damage control. I'm General Marcus Thorne, and I'm here to make you an offer you'd be wise to accept." "We don't want anything from you," Rosa said. "You want her daughter to stay alive," Thorne replied. "You want to avoid federal prosecution for stealing classified research. You want Lorenzo Vitale's son to receive continued medical care. All of that can be arranged." "In exchange for what?" Amira asked, though she already knew. "Your silence." The Phoenix Solutions research was classified for national security reasons. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, civilian testing was unauthorized. But the broader program was necessary and legal. If you continue pushing this story, you'll force us to classify everything you've discovered. Your cure for Matteo Vitale will be sealed. You won't be able to publish, won't be able to help anyone else. "You can't do that," Amira said. "We already have," Castellano said, sliding a document across the table. "Presidential order, signed this afternoon. Everything related to Project Shadow Scalpel is now classified under national security protocols. That includes your research, your treatment methods, your antitoxin formula." Amira felt her world collapsing. They'd taken her discovery, her mother's vindication, her chance to help people, and locked it away behind government secrecy. "So what? We just pretend none of this happened?" Rosa asked. "You acknowledge that you made an honest mistake," Thorne said. "That you misinterpreted classified research and jumped to incorrect conclusions. In exchange, we drop all potential charges. We provide your daughter with a full scholarship to any university she chooses, and we ensure Matteo Vitale receives the best medical care available. And if we refuse, then we prosecute everyone involved for theft of classified information unauthorized medical experimentation, and conspiracy to release state secrets. Your daughter goes to prison. You go to prison. Dr. Hale loses his medical license. Lorenzo Vitale dies in federal custody. Matteo becomes a ward of the state. The threat hung in the air, brutal in its clarity. They had no real choice. The government had the power to destroy all of them, and they'd use it without hesitation. You killed those children, Amira said, her voice shaking with rage. You tested illegal weapons on American citizens. And now you want us to help you cover it up. I want you to understand reality, Thorne said. Phoenix Solutions was a mistake, and people will quietly lose their jobs over it. But the broader program protects this country. Sometimes protection requires difficult choices. Like murdering Dr. Sarah Mitchell when she tried to expose you. Something flickered across Thorne's face. Dr. Mitchell's death was investigated and ruled accidental. Where's Dr. Valdez? Rosa asked suddenly. What did you do with him? Dr. Valdez is in protective custody, Castellano said, cooperating with our investigation. He'll likely spend the rest of his life in a comfortable federal facility, helping us ensure nothing like Phoenix Solutions happens again. So he gets protection while we get threats, Amira said bitterly. He knows where the bodies are buried, Thorne replied. You just stumbled onto one of them. There's a difference. They were given 24 hours to decide. Amira and Rosa were driven back to the mansion in silence, both processing what they'd learned. Nathan was already there when they arrived, looking shaken but unharmed. They have everything, he said. All our evidence, all our research. They're going to bury it so deep we'll never prove any of it happened. So we lost, Amira said, sinking into a chair. We exposed the truth, and they just classified it. Made it disappear. Not all of it, Matteo said from the doorway. He was walking better now, gaining strength every day. I'm still alive. That's not something they can classify or make disappear. I'm proof that you're brilliant, that you did the impossible. But we can't help anyone else, Amira said. They've sealed the formula. I can't publish the research. Everything I discovered dies with Matteo's cure. Rosa knelt beside her daughter. Baby, listen to me. They can seal documents and threaten prosecution, but they can't seal what's in your head. You know how you cure that boy. You understand the science. They can stop you from publishing right now, but they can't stop you from learning more, from becoming a doctor yourself, from helping people through legitimate channels. That could take years, a decade, maybe more. Then it takes a decade, Rosa said firmly. You're 17 years old. You have time. And while you're learning and growing and becoming the doctor you were meant to be, the world knows your name. People know what you did. That's not nothing. Amira wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the injustice of it all. But she was exhausted. Exhausted from fighting, from running, from trying to do the right thing in a world that punished righteousness. The next morning, they accepted the government's offer. Amira signed papers acknowledging misinterpretation of data and agreeing not to publish classified research. In exchange, all potential criminal charges were dropped. Rosa's arrest record was expunged. Nathan kept his medical license. Lorenzo would serve time for his documented crimes, but in a minimum security facility instead of Supermax prison. And Amira received a full scholarship to Harvard, with a guarantee of admission to their medical school if she maintained her grades. It's not justice, Agent Castellano said as they signed the final documents, but survival. Sometimes that's the best we can hope for. 3 weeks later, Amira stood in Lorenzo's prison visiting room. He looked smaller in prison orange, more human without his expensive suits and armed guards. But his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. You took the deal, he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You just chose survival over martyrdom. That's not weakness, Amira. That's wisdom. It feels like weakness. Lorenzo leaned forward. My son is alive because of you. Walking, talking, laughing. He called me yesterday, told me about his physical therapy, about his plans to study medicine like you. You gave him a future, Amira. Everything else, all the political games and government conspiracies, that's just noise. You saved my boy. Nothing can take that away. But the children who died at Phoenix Solutions will be remembered, Lorenzo interrupted. Maybe not today, Maybe not tomorrow. But someday, when you're a famous doctor with the credentials and platform to speak truth without fear, you'll tell their story. And people will listen because you'll have earned the right to be heard. Amira left the prison feeling slightly less defeated. Lorenzo was right in his way. She'd won the battle that mattered most. Matteo was alive. Everything else was just delayed, not denied. Rosa was waiting in the car, and they drove to St. Carlen's hospital for the last time. The hospital had quietly settled all claims against them, and Rosa had been offered her old job back with a raise and an official apology. She declined. After 12 years of mopping floors, Rosa Williams was done being invisible. Instead, she'd enrolled in community college, planning to finish her degree in biomedical science. "If my daughter can cure the incurable," she'd said, "I can finish what I started 30 years ago." They walked through the hospital corridors one final time, past the rooms Rosa had cleaned, past the waiting area where Amira had sat reading medical journals, past the intensive care wing where Matteo had nearly died. A janitor was mopping the floor, a young black woman who moved with the same invisible efficiency Rosa once had. She glanced up as they passed, meeting Amira's eyes for just a moment. Amira wondered what brilliance might be hiding behind that uniform, what genius might be waiting to emerge from unexpected places. She thought about how the world overlooked people, how it dismissed intelligence that didn't come wrapped in expensive degrees and fancy credentials. "You okay, baby?" Rosa asked, noticing her daughter's expression. "Yeah," Amira said. "I'm okay. I'm just thinking about the future." "What about it?" "About how many more people like us are out there. People who could change the world if someone just gave them a chance. People whose brilliance is hidden because of where they were born or what they look like or how much money they have." Rosa's smiled. "And you're going to find them, aren't you? Once you have that medical degree and that platform Lorenzo talked about, you're going to make sure they're not invisible anymore." "I'm going to try," Amira said. They left the hospital and drove home to their small apartment, the same place they'd lived for 17 years. Nothing had really changed, and yet everything was different. Amira was still the daughter of a cleaning lady, still living in a tiny apartment in a working-class neighborhood. But she was also the girl who'd saved a mafia boss's son when 100 doctors failed. The girl who'd exposed a government conspiracy. The girl who'd proven that genius could come from anywhere, even from someone waiting in a hospital corridor with a notebook and a dream. Her phone buzzed with a message from Matteo. "Physical therapy kicked my butt today, but I walked a full mile. Dad says I'll be playing basketball again by summer. Thanks for giving me that chance. You're my hero." Amira smiled and typed back, "You did the hard work. I just removed the obstacles. Proud of you." Another message, this time from Nathan. "Started my residency today. First patient was a kid with neurological symptoms nobody could explain. I thought of you and looked closer. Found the answer. You taught me that. Thank you." And finally, one from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Emily Carson from Massachusetts General Hospital. I was one of the specialists who examined Rosa Vitale and failed to help him. I've reviewed your work through unofficial channels, and I'm in awe. When you're ready to publish under proper auspices, I want to be the first to peer review your research. The medical community needs more minds like yours. Please don't let the system break you." Amira read the message 3 times, feeling something fragile and precious unfold in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose, or just the knowledge that the fight wasn't over, just postponed. She looked at her mother, at this woman who'd spent 12 years mopping floors and never complained, who'd sacrificed everything to keep her daughter safe and educated. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom." "Baby," Rosa said, pulling her close. You already have. You already have." 2 years had passed since Amira signed the government's papers and accepted their silence. 2 years of pre-med courses at Harvard, of proving herself again and again to professors who knew her name from the headlines but questioned whether the story was real or exaggerated. 2 years of watching Matteo's recovery from afar through occasional video calls, seeing him grow stronger, seeing him thrive. 2 years since her mother had died. Rosa Williams had collapsed in her community college classroom 6 months ago, a brain aneurysm that gave no warning and accepted no bargaining. One moment she was taking notes on cellular biology, finally pursuing the education she'd deferred for decades. The next, she was gone. Amira stood now in her small dorm room, holding the journal she'd found among her mother's belongings. It was worn, pages filled with Rosa's careful handwriting, dating back to her days at Phoenix Solutions. Notes on experiments, observations about ethical violations, detailed accounts of the children who'd been used as test subjects. "You saved this," Amira whispered to the empty room. "You documented everything, even when they threatened you, even when you were scared." The journal was evidence, the kind that could reopen investigations and challenge the government's classification orders. But more than that, it was proof of her mother's courage. Rosa Williams had never stopped fighting. She just fought quietly, invisibly, waiting for the right moment. Amira's phone buzzed. A text from Nathan, now completing his residency at Mass General. "Check your email. Important." She opened her laptop and found a message from Dr. Emily Carson, the specialist who'd reached out 2 years ago. The subject line read, "An opportunity for truth." "Dear Amira," the email began, "I know you've been constrained by classification orders, unable to publish your research or speak publicly about your discoveries. But I've been working with an international coalition of medical researchers who operate outside U.S. jurisdiction. They're willing to publish your work under humanitarian protections. The government can't stop research published in Geneva under WHO protocols. If you're ready to share what you know, we can help you do it safely and legally. Your mother's story deserves to be told. Those children deserve to be remembered." Amira stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This was it. The chance Rosa had been waiting for. The platform Lorenzo had told her she'd eventually earn. She'd spent 2 years building credibility, earning degrees, establishing herself as a legitimate scientist rather than just a teenage prodigy with a controversial story. She was ready. Over the next 3 months, Amira worked with Dr. Carson's international team, carefully reconstructing her research in a way that wouldn't technically violate the classification orders. She focused on the medical science rather than the political conspiracy, on the treatment methodology rather than the government's involvement. She used her mother's journal as a historical reference, documenting the children who died not as victims of Project Shadow Scalpel, but as unnamed patients in case studies. It was strategic, careful, and completely legal. The paper was published in The Lancet, one of the world's most prestigious medical journals, under the title, "Novel Approach to Synthetic Neurotoxin Neutralization, a Case Study in Creative Diagnostic Thinking." Amira was listed as the primary author, with Dr. Carson and her mother, Rosa Williams, credited posthumously as contributing researchers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Medical schools around the world began requesting Amira for lectures. Research institutions offered grants. The WHO invited her to Geneva to present her findings. Within weeks, her antitoxin formula was being reproduced in labs across Europe and Asia, helping patients who'd been exposed to similar synthetic compounds. The U.S. government tried to suppress the publication, but international law protected it. They couldn't classify research published outside their jurisdiction, especially when it was framed purely as medical science rather than political exposure. General Thorne called her personally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You violated the spirit of our agreement." "I violated nothing," Amira replied calmly. "I didn't mention Project Shadow Scalpel. I didn't reference classified research. I published a medical paper about treating toxin exposure. That's not illegal. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Williams." "No, General. I'm playing the long game, the one my mother taught me. You can't silence science forever. Truth has a way of emerging, even when powerful people try to bury it." Thorne was quiet for a moment. "Your mother would be proud, and probably furious that her courage got her daughter on our radar again." "My mother was always on your radar. She just made you think she was invisible." Amira paused. "The children who died at Phoenix Solutions have names now, General. I included them in the acknowledgments section, listed as patients who contributed to medical understanding through their sacrifice. It's subtle, but people who know where to look will find them. They won't be forgotten anymore." "You're making enemies, Amira." "I'm making history," she corrected. There's a difference. The publication of her research changed everything. Medical schools that had been cautiously interested became actively competitive, all wanting to claim Amira Williams as their student. She chose Johns Hopkins for medical school, partly for their excellent program and partly because they'd offered a full scholarship that included funding for a memorial in Rosa's name. The dedication ceremony for the Rosa Williams Memorial Laboratory took place on a bright autumn morning. Amira stood before a gathered crowd of students, faculty, and press, looking at the bronze plaque that bore her mother's name and likeness. Rosa Williams was a cleaning lady. Amira began, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. She mopped floors, emptied trash, and was invisible to most people who passed her in hospital corridors. But she was also a scientist, a whistleblower, and a hero. She tried to stop illegal research that killed children. She lost her career for speaking truth to power. She spent decades being invisible because it was the only way to keep her daughter safe. Amira paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Some were crying. Others looked angry, finally understanding the injustice Rosa had endured. This laboratory is dedicated to her memory and to everyone like her. The brilliant minds hidden behind uniforms and low-wage jobs. The geniuses society overlooks because of their race, their economic status, their lack of traditional credentials. We're going to find them. We're going to give them opportunities. And we're going to make sure they're never invisible again. The crowd erupted in applause. Among them, Amira saw Nathan, now wearing his white coat with pride, wiping tears from his eyes. She saw Dr. Carson, who'd risked her reputation to help publish the research. She saw Rosa Vitale, now 17 and healthy, who'd traveled from across the country to attend. And she saw federal agents, watching from the periphery, documenting everything. Let them watch, Amira thought. I'm not hiding anymore. After the ceremony, Mateo pulled her aside. He was taller now, athletic despite his ordeal, with his father's intense eyes but a gentler expression. My dad wanted me to give you something, he said, handing her an envelope. He's not allowed to contact you directly because of the legal restrictions, but he wanted you to have this. Amira opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter on prison stationery. Amira, I'm writing this from my cell, where I'm serving year 3 of a 15-year sentence. I won't bore you with claims of redemption or transformation. Men like me don't get redemption. We just get consequences. But I want you to know that watching my son become the man he is today, a man who wants to heal instead of hurt, who wants to build instead of destroy, that's given my life meaning it never had before. You saved more than his body. You saved his soul. And maybe, in some small way, you saved mine too. The foundation I established in your name has helped 127 underprivileged students access medical education. It's a small thing compared to the harm I've caused, but it's something. Your mother understood that even small acts of good matter. She cleaned floors and raised a daughter who changed the world. I hope to spend my remaining years making the world slightly less terrible than I found it. Thank you for showing me that's possible. Lorenzo. Amira folded the letter carefully, adding it to her mother's journal. These were the documents of transformation, evidence that change was possible even in the darkest circumstances. How is he really doing? Amira asked Mateo. He's different in prison. Quieter. He teaches GED classes to other inmates. Helps them write letters to their families. He'll never be a good man, but he's trying to be a better one. Mateo smiled slightly. He talks about you sometimes. Says you're the only person who ever looked at him and saw possibility for change instead of just a monster to fear. Everyone has possibility, Amira said. That's what my mom taught me. Even people who've done terrible things can choose to do better. Is that why you became a doctor? To help people nobody else believes in. I became a doctor because someone has to fix what's broken. Systems, bodies, souls. All of it needs healing. Medical school proved to be both easier and harder than Amira expected. The coursework was demanding, but manageable for someone who'd been reading medical journals since childhood. The real challenge was the culture, the hierarchy, the subtle and not-so-subtle reminders that she didn't belong. You're only here because of the publicity, one classmate said during a study session. Everyone knows you got lucky with that MAFIA kid. One lucky diagnosis doesn't make you a doctor. Then I'll make 1,000 unlucky ones, and we'll see if they add up, Amira replied calmly. She learned not to waste energy on people who'd already decided what she was worth. But there were also professors who recognized her brilliance, who pushed her to think creatively and challenge conventional approaches. Dr. Richard Sullivan, her biochemistry professor, became an unexpected mentor. You see patterns other students miss, he told her after she'd solved a particularly complex case study. It's not just intelligence, though you have plenty of that. It's perspective. You've seen medicine from angles most doctors never consider. From below, looking up at a system that wasn't built for people like you. Is that a compliment or an observation? Amira asked. Both. The best doctors are the ones who remember that every patient is someone's mother, someone's child, someone's whole world. You understand that in a way many of your classmates never will. Don't lose it. In her third year of medical school, Amira launched the Rosa Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to identifying and supporting brilliant students from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to pursue medicine. Nathan joined as medical director. Dr. Carson served on the advisory board. Even Mateo contributed, having graduated college with a degree in pre-med and plans to follow in Amira's footsteps. The first cohort included 12 students, children of janitors, cashiers, farm workers, and factory workers. Kids who'd been told they weren't medical school material because they didn't have the right connections or the right last names. Kids who reminded Amira of herself, sitting in hospital waiting rooms with dreams too big for their circumstances. This is your mother's legacy, Nathan said, watching the first cohort arrive for orientation. She'd be so proud. She knew she'd never get to finish what she started, Amira replied. But she made sure I could. Every sacrifice she made, every time she chose safety over pride, it was so I could get to this moment, so I could open doors she never got to walk through. 5 years after her mother's death, Amira walked across the stage at Johns Hopkins to receive her medical degree. She graduated top of her class, with honors, with research publications, with job offers from every major hospital in the country. But she chose to do her residency at a small community hospital in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place that treated uninsured patients and immigrants and people society had forgotten. You could go anywhere, Dr. Sullivan had told her when she announced her decision. Mass General, Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. Why choose a community hospital? Because that's where people like my mother go when they're sick, Amira explained. Those are the patients who need doctors who see them as human beings, not case studies or insurance reimbursements. I became a doctor to heal people, not to build a prestigious career. On her first day of residency, Amira stood in the emergency room of St. Catherine's Community Hospital, wearing her white coat with her name embroidered on the pocket. Dr. Rosa Williams, MD. She thought about the girl she'd been 7 years ago, waiting for her mother in hospital corridors, reading discarded journals, dreaming of impossible things. She thought about Rosa, who'd cleaned these same kinds of floors in hospitals just like this one, invisible to everyone except the daughter who'd always seen her brilliance. And she thought about Mateo, about the desperate father who'd been willing to trust a 17-year-old with no credentials because he'd run out of alternatives. Dr. Williams? A nurse approached with a tablet. We have a patient in room 3. 7-year-old girl, presenting with neurological symptoms nobody can explain. 3 hospitals have sent her home, saying it's psychosomatic. Mother is a housekeeper, no insurance, but she's convinced something real is wrong. Amira took the tablet and reviewed the limited chart information. The symptoms were subtle but distinctive, the kind of thing doctors might dismiss if they weren't looking closely. But Amira had been trained by necessity to look closely to see what others missed. I'll take the case, she said. Let's find out what's really wrong. As she walked toward room 3, she passed a young girl sitting in the waiting area, maybe 13 or 14, with a backpack full of books, clearly waiting for her mother who worked somewhere in a hospital. The girl was reading a biology textbook, completely absorbed despite the chaos of the emergency room around her. Amira paused. That college-level material you're reading. The girl looked up, startled. Is that bad? No. It's impressive. What's her name? Jasmine. Jasmine Carter. My mom works in housekeeping here. I wait for her after school. I used to do the same thing. Wait for my mother at the hospital where she worked. I'd read medical journals, try to understand the complex cases. Amira smiled. You planning to be a doctor, Jasmine? I want to, but we don't have money for college. My guidance counselor says I should be realistic about my options. Amira pulled out a business card and handed it to the girl. This is for the Rosa Initiative. We provide scholarships and mentorship for students exactly like you. When you're ready to apply to college, reach out. We'll make sure money isn't what stops you from becoming the doctor you're meant to be. Jasmine's eyes went wide. You're Dr. Williams, the one who saved that boy when nobody else could. I'm Dr. Williams, and I'm also the daughter of a cleaning lady who taught me that brilliance can come from anywhere. Don't let anyone tell you you're not smart enough or qualified enough or the right kind of enough. You are enough, exactly as you are. Jasmine clutched the business card like it was made of gold. Thank you. Thank yourself by studying hard and never giving up. The world needs more doctors who understand what it's like to be invisible. Promise me you'll remember that. I promise. Amira continued to room 3, where a tired woman in a housekeeping uniform sat beside a small girl who lay pale and listless on the examination table. The woman looked up with desperate hope and exhausted resignation warring in her expression. Are you the doctor? The woman asked. I am. Dr. Williams. Tell me everything about your daughter's symptoms. Don't leave anything out, even if other doctors told you it didn't matter. I want to hear it all. As the mother talked, Amira listened with the full attention her own mother had taught her give. She examined the girl carefully, noticing subtle signs others had dismissed. Within an hour, she'd identified a rare autoimmune condition that was treatable if caught early. You saved her life, the mother cried when Amira explained the diagnosis and treatment plan. The other hospitals said I was being paranoid, that I was wasting their time. But you listened. I listened because my mother taught me that a parent's intuition matters. That people who love patients often see things clinical observation misses. Amira squeezed the woman's hand. You advocated for your daughter even when doctors dismissed you. That's what saved her life. I just provided the medical expertise to back up what you already knew. 10 years after saving Rosa Vitale, Amira stood in the auditorium at Johns Hopkins, preparing to deliver a keynote address at the National Medical Conference. The room was packed with doctors, researchers, students, all there to hear from a woman who become a symbol of innovative thinking and compassionate care. She looked out at the crowd and saw so many familiar faces. Nathan, now an attending physician and co-director of the Rosa Initiative. Dr. Carlen, who'd retired but still mentored young researchers. Rosa Vitale, now a third-year medical student following the path Amira had blazed. And in the front row, wearing their brand-new white coats, were 15 Rosa Initiative graduates who'd just matched into their residency programs. The first full cohort to complete the journey from disadvantaged students to licensed physicians. 10 years ago, Amira began. I was a 17-year-old girl sitting in a hospital corridor, reading medical journals and dreaming of impossible things. My mother was mopping floors, invisible to almost everyone. We were exactly the kind of people the medical establishment overlooks. Too poor, too black, too uneducated to matter. She paused, letting the words settle over the audience. But my mother was brilliant. And when a boy was dying and 100 credentialed experts had failed, her daughter, armed with nothing but observation and determination, found the answer they'd all missed. That story became famous. It became inspiring. It became a symbol of hope for underdogs everywhere. Another pause. But here's what that story was really about. It was about how many Rosa Williams are out there cleaning floors and serving food and doing the invisible work that keeps our society running. People whose brilliance is overlooked because we've decided that intelligence requires certain credentials, certain backgrounds, certain access to power. How many cures have we missed because we didn't listen to janitors who notice patterns? How many innovations have we lost because we dismissed the ideas of people without impressive degrees? Amira looked at the Rosa Initiative graduates in the front row. These 15 doctors represent a revolution. Not because they're exceptional, though they are, but because they're proof that genius exists everywhere, in every community, behind every circumstance. We just have to decide to look for it, to value it, to give it the opportunity to flourish. She held up her mother's journal, worn now from years of handling. My mother documented the truth when powerful people wanted it buried. She sacrificed her career to try to save children nobody else cared about. She spent decades being invisible because it was the only way to protect her daughter. And then she raised that daughter to refuse invisibility, to demand space in rooms that weren't built for people like us, to change systems from the inside. Amira's voice grew stronger, more passionate. We are changing medicine. We're making it more compassionate, more innovative, more human. We're ensuring that the next time a brilliant teenager has an idea that challenges conventional wisdom, someone listens. We're making sure that the next time a patient's mother insists something is wrong, a doctor takes her seriously. We're building a medical system that sees everyone, not just the people who look like the doctors or talk like the doctors or come from the same neighborhoods as the doctors. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. My mother cleaned floors, Amira said, her voice soft but clear. But she also cleaned something more important. She cleaned away the idea that some people don't matter, that some lives aren't worth fighting for, that some truths should stay buried because exposing them is inconvenient. She placed her hand over her heart, feeling the weight of everything Rosa had given her. Mom, if you can hear me, I want you to know, I kept my promise. I became a doctor. I helped people nobody else wanted to help. I gave voice to the children Phoenix Solutions killed. I built something that will outlast us both. You're not invisible anymore. You never were to me, but now the whole world sees you too. Amira looked out at the audience one more time. We honor Rosa Williams not by feeling sorry for what she endured, but by ensuring no one else has to choose between safety and justice. By building systems that value brilliance regardless of where it comes from. By remembering that every person cleaning floors, serving food, or doing society's invisible work might be exactly the genius we need if we just bother to listen. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Amira stood at the podium, letting the applause wash over her, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The fear, the danger, the loss, the compromise, the long years of proving herself. All of it necessary. All of it worth it. After the speech, Matteo found her backstage. He was wearing a small pin on his white coat, a heart-shaped design that had been on Amira's cleaning uniform all those years ago. My dad called from prison this morning, Matteo said. He watched your speech on the live stream. He wanted me to tell you something. What? He said you healed more than his son. You healed his soul, and that your mother didn't just clean floors. She cleaned hearts. Matteo's eyes were wet with tears. He's dying, Amira. Lung cancer. They're giving him maybe 6 months. Amira felt a complicated wave of emotion. Lorenzo Vitale had been a criminal, a killer, a man who'd caused immeasurable harm. But he'd also been a father desperate to save his son. A man who'd chosen to face consequences rather than continue running. Someone who'd tried, in his limited way, to do better. Can I visit him? Amira asked. He'd like that. 2 weeks later, Amira stood in a prison hospice room, looking at Lorenzo Vitale. He was thin now, his skin gray, his breathing labored. But his eyes were still sharp, still seeing everything. Dr. Williams, he said, managing a weak smile. You finally have the credentials to match the brilliance. Lorenzo, she replied, pulling up a chair beside his bed. How are you feeling? Dying? He said it matter-of-factly, but peacefully. That's more than I deserved. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. I need to tell you something, Lorenzo said. Before I go, a confession, if you will, to the only person who might understand. I'm listening. When I watched you work to save Matteo, I saw someone willing to sacrifice everything for truth. You risked your safety, your mother's safety, your entire future, all because you believed a dying boy deserved a chance. That kind of purity, that kind of courage, I'd never seen it before. It terrified me. Why? Because it showed me what I could have been, what I chose not to be. Lorenzo's eyes glistened. I built an empire on fear and violence. You build a legacy on compassion and knowledge. We both changed the world, Amira. But you changed it for the better. You helped too, Amira said gently. The foundation, the scholarships, all of it matters. Blood money, trying to buy redemption, Lorenzo said. But maybe that's okay. Maybe even tainted money can do clean work in the right hands. That's what my mother believed. That every small act of good matters, regardless of where it comes from. Lorenzo reached out with a trembling hand, and Amira took it. Thank you, he whispered, for saving my son, for giving him a chance to be better than me, for showing both of us that transformation is possible. Thank you for trusting me when nobody else would. Lorenzo smiled. I didn't trust you. I was desperate, but desperation led me to the right person. Sometimes grace disguises itself as luck. He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep. Matteo was by his side. At the funeral, only a handful of people attended. Matteo, Amira, Nathan, and a few of Lorenzo's former associates who'd gone straight. No mob bosses, no criminal empire representatives. Just the remnants of a man trying to end his life with dignity. He left everything to the foundation, Matteo told Amira after the service. Every penny, the house, the investments, all of it. He said he wanted his death to fund more life, more opportunities, more chances for people like you and your mom. Amira looked at Matteo, at this young man who'd turned his second chance into a calling, who'd chosen healing over harm, who'd broken the cycle of violence that had defined his family for generations. Your father did something rare, Amira said. He changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but genuinely. That takes courage most people never find. I'm going to be a pediatric neurologist, Matteo said, specializing in rare conditions. I want to be the doctor who saves the kids everyone else gives up on. Like you were saved. Exactly like I was saved. He smiled. We all carry our scars, Amira. The question is whether we let them define us or refine us. My dad's scars defined him. Mine are refining me, because I had you showing me that survival isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. 15 years after that night in St. Carlen's Hospital, when a cleaning lady's daughter first noticed an anomaly on a dying boy's monitors, Dr. Amira Williams stood in the Rosa Williams Memorial Laboratory at Johns Hopkins, surrounded by her research team. They were working on a breakthrough treatment for rare neurological conditions, building on the work Amira had started when she was 17. The lab was filled with brilliant minds from diverse backgrounds. The daughter of immigrants who'd worked in restaurants. The son of a single father who'd driven a taxi. A former foster kid who'd aged out of the system but never gave up on her dreams. All of them Rosa Initiative graduates. All of them proving that genius came from everywhere. Dr. Williams? One of her researchers, a young woman named Sophie Turner, approached with results from their latest trial. The treatment is working. We've successfully neutralized the synthetic compound in all test subjects with 0 adverse effects. This could save thousands of lives. Amira reviewed the data, feeling pride and grief in equal measure. Her mother should have been here for this. Should have seen her daughter leading a team, pushing boundaries, changing medicine. But Rosa's sacrifice had made all of this possible. Publish it, Amira said. Full open access. No patents, no profit motive. This belongs to the world. That evening, Amira returned to St. Carlen's Hospital for the first time in over a decade. The hospital had been renovated, modernized, but the bones were the same. She walked through corridors her mother had once cleaned, past rooms where she'd waited with dreams and notebooks, past the intensive care wing where Matteo had nearly died. A bronze statue stood in the main lobby now. Rosa Williams, holding both a mop and a stethoscope, representing the duality of her existence. Invisible and essential, overlooked and brilliant. The plaque beneath read, "In memory of Rosa Williams, who taught us that intelligence requires only opportunity, and that compassion is the highest form of wisdom." Amira placed her hand on the statue's base, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingers. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. "Everything you wanted. Everything you sacrifice for. It's real. It's lasting. You're not invisible anymore. As she turned to leave, she saw a young girl in the waiting area, maybe 15 or 16, with a backpack full of books, clearly waiting for a parent who worked at the hospital. The girl was reading a medical journal, completely absorbed. Amira walked over and sat down beside her. "That's advanced material you're reading." The girl looked up, recognition flashing across her face. "You're Dr. Williams." "Dr. Amira Williams." "I am." "And you are?" "Elena. Elena Mos. My mom works in environmental services here. I wait for her after school." Amira smiled, seeing herself in this girl's eager eyes. "Let me guess. You want to be a doctor, more than anything. But everyone says it's too expensive, too competitive, too impossible for someone like me." "Someone like you," Amira repeated. "You mean someone brilliant who hasn't had the advantages others get?" Elena nodded. Amira pulled out a Rosa initiative card, the same kind she'd been carrying for 15 years, and handed it to Elena. "My mother was an environmental services worker. She cleaned floors in hospitals while dreaming of changing medicine. She couldn't pursue those dreams herself, but she made sure I could. And now I make sure other brilliant kids like you can too." Elena's hands trembled as she took the card. "Really, really, study hard. Never let anyone convince you that your circumstances define your potential. And when you become a doctor, remember where you came from. Remember the people who are invisible to most of the world, because they're the ones who need doctors who see them as human beings." "I promise," Elena whispered. Amira stood, preparing to leave, when Elena called out, "Dr. Williams, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Was it worth it? All the fighting and struggling and proving yourself? Was it worth all the pain?" Amira thought about her mother, about Lorenzo, about Matteo, about all the students who'd walked through doors she'd helped open. She thought about the children who'd died at Phoenix Solutions, finally remembered and honored. She thought about the countless patients who'd been helped by the research Rosa and Amira had fought to make public. Every second of it, Amira said, because pain is temporary, but legacy is forever. Change is hard, but surrendering is harder. And the world needs people willing to stand up and say this isn't right, and I'm going to fix it, even when fixing it costs them everything. She walked out of St. Carlen's hospital into the evening light, feeling her mother's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. Rosa Williams had started as a cleaning lady with impossible dreams. She'd ended as a legend who'd changed medicine by raising a daughter who refused to be invisible. And as Amira drove home past streets she'd walked as a child, past the apartment where she and Rosa had lived, past the schools where she'd been told to be realistic about her aspirations, she understood something profound. Her mother hadn't just saved one boy by proxy. Rosa had saved thousands by refusing to let circumstances crush her daughter's spirit, by documenting truth when it was dangerous, by believing that small acts of resistance accumulate into revolution. The cleaning lady had changed the world, not despite her humble work, but through it. Through teaching her daughter that every person deserves dignity, every truth deserves exposure, every genius deserves opportunity, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. Amira pulled into her driveway and looked at the house she'd bought with her first attending physician salary. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was hers, earned through brilliance and perseverance and refusing to accept the limitations others tried to impose. Inside, on her desk, sat her mother's journal, Matteo's childhood drawings, and her medical degree. The artifacts of transformation, the evidence that one person's courage could ripple across generations. She picked up her laptop and began writing. Not a medical paper this time, but something different. A memoir. Her mother's story, told properly, completely, without the compromises the government had forced. She'd waited 15 years to tell it. Waited until she had the platform and protection to tell it right. The first sentence wrote itself. My mother was a cleaning lady who changed medicine by refusing to let her daughter's brilliance be swept away with the dust. Amira smiled, feeling Rosa's approval across the boundaries of life and death. This was the final piece, the complete truth, The full story of how a woman who cleaned floors had healed the world by raising a daughter who understood that compassion and intelligence together could cure more than disease. They could cure injustice. They could cure invisibility. They could cure a system that valued credentials over capability, pedigree over potential. And in doing so, they'd proven something essential. That genius was everywhere, waiting to be recognized. That courage was ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That legacy was built not in grand gestures, but in daily decisions to choose principle over convenience. Rosa Williams had mopped floors and saved the world, and her daughter had finished what she started. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge what you think you know about courage, justice, and the price of doing what's right.